Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really digging into some fascinating history. We're looking at a century and a half of global leadership within the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Yeah, it's quite a story. We're basically tracking the leaders, the presidents of their general conference, which is their, top global authority.
Right, from the very beginning in 1863.
All the way up to today, to the current leadership. It's a huge span of time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And our goal here isn't just, listing names and dates. We want to kind of map the journey of this church. How did it go from this, pretty small American movement to this massive global organization? We figured looking at the leaders, their challenges, what they focused on, their legacies, that's the best way to see that evolution.
That's the plan. And maybe for listeners who aren't as familiar, we should quickly sketch out who the SDA Church is. At its core, it's a Christian denomination.
Okay.
Their main thing is inspiring people toward wholeness and hope, all based on the Bible, looking towards an eternal future with God.
And what makes them distinct, theologically speaking?
Well, there are a few key things. Probably the most well-known is observing the Sabbath on Saturday, the seventh day. They trace that right back to creation in the Bible.
Okay, the Saturday Sabbath. What else?
There's a strong focus on Christ's second coming, the Advent part of their name. And they also have something called the sanctuary doctrine. It's a specific way they interpret certain prophecies about Christ's work in heaven right now.
So, deeply held beliefs driving a global mission. But how does an organization this big actually work? Can't just be like a local church council.
No, definitely not. It's got a pretty clear structure, a hierarchy built to manage things worldwide, but also, get the mission done effectively. Think of it like layers.
Layers, okay.
At the bottom, you've got the local churches everywhere. They group together into conferences or missions, which handle things regionally.
Right.
Those conferences then form unions, bigger areas, maybe a whole country or a group of countries.
Okay, getting bigger.
Then you've got the divisions. These are major zones like North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia. Big administrative chunks of the world.
And the top layer.
That's the General Conference, the GC. It's the highest authority for the whole world church, sets the policies, manages the big picture finances, coordinates everything globally.
And the GC president is the person leading that top layer.
Exactly. The GC president is the worldwide leader. They preside over the big general conference sessions. Those usually happen every 5 years. They oversee policy, make sure the governance structure is working across all those layers.
Right.
And they really set the direction for the church's global mission. It's got to be one of the most complex leadership jobs in the religious world, balancing theology, culture, and massive logistics.
That really sets the scene. Okay, let's dive in. The founding era, 1863 to 1888. This is about just getting established, right?
Right.
Figuring out how to be an organized church.
Absolutely. These were, let's say, formative years, lots of trial and error. They were moving from being just a scattered group expecting Christ's return very soon to building something that would last.
And the very first GC president was John Byington. Short term, 1863 to 1865.
Right, just 2 years, but foundational. He was key in just setting up the basic idea of Adventist governance. What's really interesting, though, looking back at his life before that, he was apparently a strong voice for social justice, very involved in the abolition movement against slavery, even worked with the Underground Railroad.
Wow, okay, so the first leader is already mixing structure with, pretty radical social action for the time.
It tells you something about the early DNA, doesn't it? But his challenges were huge. They were starting from scratch, no real structure, hardly any money.
Right.
And the church was tiny, mostly just in a few U.S. states. He basically had to convince people, these very independent-minded believers, that they even needed a central organization.
Tough sell sometimes. Okay, after Byington comes a giant figure, James White.
Yeah.
But his presidency was complicated. 3 different times.
Yeah, 3 non-consecutive terms between 1865 and 1880. It tells you, first, things were still pretty unstable organizationally.
Makes sense.
And second, his influence was just immense. He was a co-founder and, of course, married to Ellen G. White, who they see as having a prophetic gift. He was central.
So what was his big contribution, organizationally speaking, when he was president?
He really built on what Byington started. James White was the engine behind the early infrastructure. He started the Review and Herald publishing house that wasn't just a magazine. It was how they shared their message, coordinated things.
Communication hub.
Exactly. And he was crucial for setting up their schools. He knew if they wanted to grow, especially globally, they needed trained people, standardized literature. He built those systems.
But you mentioned instability. The sources talk about controversies, leadership changes, what was going on there.
A lot of it was hashing out the details. How exactly should the church be run? How should money be handled? How do you balance the Bible with Ellen White's writings? James White was a strong leader, pushed for centralization.
And not everyone liked that.
Right. There were disagreements. These early years were full of intense debates, theological and practical, growing pains, really.
Okay. And squeezed between White's terms, we have John and Andrews. 1867 to 1869. His legacy seems focused outwards.
Totally. Andrews was a real scholar, but he's remembered as the pioneer missionary, the key thing. He was the first official Adventist missionary sent outside the U.S. to Europe.
He physically moved his family?
Yep, to Switzerland. That was the first big step beyond America's borders. His presidency itself was short, so maybe less administrative impact long term, but he set the course for global mission. That became central to their identity.
And rounding out this early era is George the Butler, 2 terms, finishing up in 1888.
Butler comes across as the defender of the faith in that period. His focus was on doctrinal purity, making sure everyone stuck to the early beliefs. He really emphasized following Ellen White's writings closely as they were kind of codifying their theology.
But again, hints of conflict, disagreements, maybe being a bit authoritarian.
Yeah, that tension is important. Butler wanted to keep the young church unified, protect it from splitting, so he pushed for strict adherence. But as the church grew, different ideas started popping up, especially around a key doctrine called righteousness by faith.
Okay.
His top-down style clashed with people wanting more, let's say, theological breathing room. So you see this early struggle. How do you stay true to your roots while also growing and adapting? That's a theme that pops up again and again.
It definitely sounds like it. Which takes us neatly into the next phase.
Yeah.
The era of global expansion and institutional development, roughly 1888 to 1936. This is where they really go global, right?
This is the major shift from being mainly a U.S. church with a few outposts to a truly international body. And the leader kicking this off is Ole A. Olsen, 1888 to 1897.
And the big thing about Olsen.
He was the first GC president born outside the United States. He was Norwegian.
That's a huge symbolic step right there.
Absolutely. It signals that international vision. Olsen focused on building up the church governance globally, not just running everything from the U.S. headquarters in Battle Creek, Michigan. He knew the structure had to work in different cultures, under different laws.
Must have been incredibly difficult back then. Communication, travel.
Immense challenges. We're talking late 19th century, no email, no easy international calls, slow ships, getting directives out, moving money, managing people across oceans. It took weeks, months sometimes. These guys had to be master logisticians as much as theologians.
Incredible. Okay, after Olsen comes George A. Irwin, 1897 to 1901. Building on Olsen's work.
Pretty much. Irwin focused on strengthening that early international structure, pushing mission expansion, yes, but also crucially setting up training for local non-American workers. He was laying the groundwork for the explosion in growth that was coming.
And then the big one for this era, Arthur G. Daniels, president for 21 years. 1901 to 1922. That's the longest term ever, right?
Still the record holder. Yeah, Daniels' presidency was transformative. This was the era of really serious institutional development alongside that global expansion. That long tenure let him push through some massive fundamental changes.
Okay, like what? The outline mentions a sustentation plan. What was that about? Sounds financial.
It was deeply financial and deeply structural. Before Daniels, money was handled much more locally. Tithes, offerings, they mostly stayed within local churches or conferences.
Yeah.
This made funding the big central global mission really inconsistent.
Okay.
The sustentation plan basically centralized how tithe money was handled across the whole denomination. It created a reliable pool of funds managed by the General Conference.
So it centralized the money and therefore the power to direct the mission.
Exactly. It gave the GC the financial muscle to strategically fund new missions worldwide, build hospitals, start universities. It powered the transition into a truly global enterprise. It was the economic engine.
He also moved the headquarters from Battle Creek, Michigan to Washington, D.C. Why?
That was a huge move, symbolic and practical. Battle Creek was the historic heart, But there have been some institutional problems, and then a massive fire destroyed their main publishing house in 1902. It felt like a turning point.
A crisis point.
Yeah. Moving to D.C. was partly about getting away from that environment, but also about positioning the church for more national and international influence, a fresh start, closer to the centers of power.
Makes sense. But 21 years. Does that kind of stability have a downside?
It can. While it allowed for deep change, it also meant the organization could become a bit rigid. As the world changed rapidly, some felt the church under Daniels wasn't adapting fast enough, maybe became too bureaucratic. It created some pressure later on.
Okay, so after Daniels' long run, we get William A. Spicer, 1922 to 1930. The focus seems to shift to integrating different aspects of the mission.
Yeah, Spicer built on Daniels' foundation. He saw that a modern global church needed more than just preachers. He really pushed media, radio, film where they could, and tied it closely to the education and health work.
So bringing those three pillars together, media, education, health.
Exactly, integrating them into one coherent missionary strategy, using all the tools available.
But his time was cut short by illness. And that leads us to Charles H. Watson, 1930 to 1936. Right into the teeth of the Great Depression.
Watson's presidency was all about navigating that crisis. Imagine leading a fast-growing global church when the world economy collapses. Financial constraints were just immense.
Keeping the lights on must have been the main job.
Pretty much. But incredibly, he managed to keep the mission going, even expanding in places like Australia. His big legacy was careful stewardship, guiding the church through that massive economic storm without it sinking.
From building institutions to surviving global crises. That takes us into the next big chunk of time. Mid-century stabilization and global growth, 1936 to 1990, World War II, post-war boom, and this huge shift towards the global south.
Right. This is where the demographics really start to flip, where the majority of members start being outside North America and Europe.
Kicking this off is J.L. McGullany. A long-term, 1936 to 1950, he led through all of World War II.
McGullany's job was stabilization in chaos. Think about it, leading a global church when your members are on opposite sides of a war, communication is cut, travel is impossible, people are displaced or drafted.
An administrative nightmare.
Absolutely. He had to keep the mission alive while juggling resources, dealing with wartime restrictions, and then planning for the massive task of rebuilding afterwards, especially in Europe and Asia. He kept the global structure from falling apart during the war.
A crucial, if maybe less flashy, role. His successor, William H. Branson, had a shorter run, 1950-1954.
Branson basically kept the post-war momentum going, expanding the church's reach as the world started to open up again. Short term, so maybe less policy impact, but he kept the focus on worldwide growth.
Then comes Reuben R. Figure, 1954 to 1966. Now, connecting the dots, Figure seems like the guy who really drove that shift to the global south you mentioned.
He's absolutely pivotal there. Figure actively pushed expansion into what they called underreached areas. His focus was intense, setting up missions, schools, hospitals in Africa, Asia, Latin America. This is when the membership numbers really start to take off outside the West.
But that kind of explosive growth in so many different places must have caused problems too.
Oh, definitely. The complexity just shot through the roof. The sources mention challenges with accountability and transparency in how things were run globally.
Like managing money and people across dozens of countries.
Exactly. Different laws, different banking systems, political instability in some places. Trying to manage all that with the centralized system Daniels had built, it put a massive strain on the headquarters. Things were getting almost too big, too fast for the existing structure.
So the next president, Robert H. Pierson, 1966 to 1979, probably had to deal with the fallout of that rapid growth.
Yeah, Pierson seemed to recognize they needed to sort of consolidate and strengthen the systems. He focused on improving governance, shoring up the main program's mission, education, health. But he still faced that constant issue. Not enough resources for the fast-growing areas, the demand for schools, clinics.
Yeah.
It just kept outpacing the money available.
Always a challenge.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Neil C. Wilson, 1979 to 1990. His focus sounds very administrative. Governance, reform, integration.
Neil Wilson really tried to tackle that organizational complexity head-on. The church was enormous by this point. He worked on global integration, trying to reform the governance structure to handle the scale. He experimented with giving more power to the regional divisions while keeping overall strategic control at the GC.
Did it work?
Well, the sources suggest that even with his efforts, the growth still kept outpacing the structures financially and administratively. It's almost ironic. The biggest challenge was managing success. Too much growth too quickly.
That theme of managing growth and complexity seems central, and it leads us right into the modern era, 1990 up to today. Technology, inclusion debates, controversy.
Yep, this is where things get really complex, often playing out under a much brighter media spotlight. The era starts with Robert S. Falkenberg, 1990 to 1999. A mixed legacy here.
What was the positive impact?
Falkenberg championed something called the Global Mission Initiative. It was a very focused, strategic push to establish a church presence in every single population segment or territory around the world that didn't have one yet. It was quite innovative and really accelerated outreach.
But there's a significant but here, isn't there?
There is. His presidency ended abruptly. Falkenberg resigned amid allegations of financial misconduct. For a church that emphasizes stewardship and high ethical standards, this was, well, a major crisis.
Shook confidence, I imagine.
Deeply. It forced a very hard look at internal controls, accountability, transparency across the board. Painful, but probably necessary for the institution's long-term health.
A tough lesson. Okay, moving past that crisis. Jan Paulsen takes over, 1999 to 2010. He sounds like a shift towards a more modern international approach.
That's a good way to see it. Paulsen, like Olsen way back, was also from Norway, the second non-American president. He brought a very contemporary global view. He talked a lot about local autonomy, letting different regions adapt policies to their context.
And inclusion.
Yes. He really pushed the conversation forward on including women in leadership roles, especially at higher levels. That was, and still is, a sensitive topic in some parts of the church, but he opened the door for serious discussion.
So, trying to balance global unity with local diversity and modern values. What was the main friction point?
It's that classic tension. How do you let regions adapt and respond to local needs, which the global membership increasingly wanted, while still maintaining consistent worldwide church policy on core beliefs and practices? Paulsen navigated that tightrope for over a decade.
And that brings us to the president who just completed his term, Ted N.C. Wilson. A long tenure again, 2010 to 2025.
Ted Wilson's presidency had a very clear theological stamp. He strongly emphasized what's generally called theological conservatism, frequent calls for strict loyalty to the church's historic understanding of the Bible, and particularly the writings of Ellen White.
Okay. And he promoted something specific, last generation theology. What's that about?
Right. It's a particular focus within Adventism. Essentially, last generation theology emphasizes that the final generation of believers before Christ's return needs to reach a very high level of spiritual maturity, reflecting Christ's character perfectly, sometimes termed sinlessness. It puts a strong emphasis on personal holiness as a prerequisite for the end times.
So a very high standard. How did that focus affect his leadership style?
Well, that doctrinal emphasis, combined with a more centralized approach to leadership than Paulsen, often led to friction with some of the divisions, especially in the West.
Why the friction?
Mainly over issues where culture and tradition clashed with central policy. The big one was the role of women in ministry, specifically ordination. Divisions wanting more local autonomy and flexibility on issues like that often found themselves at odds with the GC under Wilson's leadership, which prioritized global uniformity based on its interpretation of scripture and tradition.
So he succeeded in maintaining doctrinal consistency from his perspective, and he definitely advanced the use of technology and media.
Oh, hugely. Adventist media outreach exploded under his watch.
But it sounds like it came with significant internal tension over governance and cultural issues.
That's a fair summary. He led through challenging cultural shifts, kept the theological identity firm as he saw it, but the debates over authority and adaptation were constant.
Which leads us right up to the present moment, the General Conference session in St. Louis, July 2025. A real changing of the guard.
Absolutely. This feels like a truly significant transition, maybe the biggest since Olsen back in 1888 because of the geography involved. Erton Köhler was elected. He's the 18th person to hold the office.
And the historic part is?
He's the first ever GC president from South America, from Brazil. It's a powerful symbol of where the church's membership growth has been concentrated for decades now. The leadership finally reflects that demographic reality.
The center of gravity has officially shifted south. That's huge. What's Köhler's background? What prepared him for this?
Well, he grew up in the church. His father was an Adventist pastor in southern Brazil. He's got the theological training BA, MA from the Adventist University in Brazil, and he's even working on a Doctor of Ministry from Andrews University in the U.S.
And his work experience seems relevant to the Global South context.
Very much so. He started as a local pastor in São Paulo, moved up through youth ministry leadership, and then, this is key, he was president of the entire South American division from 2007 onwards.
So nearly 2 decades, leading one of the church's biggest, fastest-growing, most complex regions.
Exactly. He knows firsthand about managing growth, allocating resources and developing economies, dealing with diverse cultures within that division. He's lived the challenges the global church faces.
So what's his focus now? What's the agenda for the Köhler era shaping up to be?
Based on what's been said, a few things stand out. First, really integrating the global church, making sure policies work everywhere but are applied sensitively. Second, doubling down on technology and media for communication and outreach.
Okay.
Third, there's a stated commitment to bringing more young people and women into leadership roles, kind of picking up and maybe accelerating what Paulson started. And finally, continuing that push for mission in areas where the church isn't established yet.
It's a massive job.
Right.
Clearly not something one person does alone. What about the team around him?
Yeah.
The other top officers at the General Conference?
Right. You need a strong, diverse team. Key roles include the secretary, that's Richard E. McEdward, who handles the official records, stats, documents.
And crucially, the treasurer CFO. Given the past issues, that role must be under scrutiny. That's Paul H. Douglas.
Yes, Paul Douglas. And his role is absolutely vital for stability and trust. He oversees the global finances from the headquarters in Maryland. The focus is intensely on stewardship, efficiency, making sure resources are used effectively for the mission.
And transparency. Accountability.
Non-negotiable from everything we see. Learning the lessons from the past, his background was pretty remarkable too.
Oh, so?
He's got over 30 years experience working for the church on literally 5 continents: Americas, Africa, Asia, Europe, Australia. He understands the complexities firsthand. Plus, he's highly qualified CPA, CA, CGMA, MBA, working on a PhD in accounting. And personally, born in Jamaica to Cuban parents. His whole profile reflects the international reality of the church today.
A truly global team.
Yeah.
Then there are the general vice presidents, the GVPs, kind of the senior advisors representing different parts of the world.
Exactly. They bring those regional perspectives right into the GC headquarters.
Yes.
The current team includes names like Thomas Lemon, Pierre Omler, Archer Steele, Saw Samuel, Leonard Johnson, Robert Osei-Bonsu, a diverse group. But we really should highlight Audrey Anderson.
Why is her appointment as a GVP significant?
Because she is only the second woman ever to serve as a general vice president for the World Church, and the very first European woman in that role. It's a major step for inclusion at the highest level.
And her background isn't just church administration.
No, it's quite varied. She worked as a legal editor, did communication consulting, then moved into church leadership, serving as executive secretary in Sweden and for the Trans-European division. Her presence signals a real commitment to bringing diverse experiences and, pointedly, women into top leadership.
Interesting. And you mentioned Archer Steele. He brings a unique perspective, too.
Very unique. Born in Kazakhstan, part of the former Soviet Union. He actually served in the Soviet military before going into theology. Holds a PhD, speaks Russian, German, English fluently. He was president of the Euro-Asia division, a vast, challenging territory.
So he understands operating in complex, sometimes restrictive environments.
Exactly. He brings that crucial experience of navigating difficult geopolitical landscapes, which is invaluable for a global church.
Okay, so we've traced this incredible line of leadership, 18 presidents over 160 years, from Byington trying to hold things together to Köhler leading a truly global behemoth. If you had to boil it down, what are the main takeaways from this whole sweep of history?
Well, a couple of things stand out consistently. One, this unwavering drive for global expansion. It's been there from Andrews right through to today. 2, building institutions, the schools, the hospitals, the publishing houses. They're fundamental to how the church operates and engages with the world.
And the constant struggles, the recurring headaches for these leaders.
It always comes back to governance, doesn't it? That perpetual balancing act. Central control versus local freedom. Think Butler, then Daniels pushing centralization, then pressures for more autonomy under Paulson, the tensions under T. Wilson, and now Köhler inheriting that need to integrate diverse regions.
Right.
Plus, managing the money globally, navigating all those cultural differences, and handling the inevitable theological debates. The sheer complexity is just immense.
So it sounds like there's also a clear trend towards adaptation, especially recently.
Definitely. You see it starting with Paulson, and it seems core to Köhler's approach. Using technology, refining the administration, trying to empower youth and women, finding ways to be relevant in a rapidly changing world while holding on to core beliefs. It's an evolution from just surviving to building to now managing this massive, complex, global reality.
Which brings us to our final thought, something for you, the listener, to consider. Erton Köhler's election isn't just symbolic, it marks a real shift. The leader is now from South America, where the majority of the church lives. Given his background, his focus on tech, inclusion, and managing growth, how do you think this fundamental geographic shift in leadership will shape the Adventist Church's identity, its mission, its cultural expression, maybe even its theological emphasis, now that the power center is arguably no longer in the West?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question for the next decade, isn't it? It will be fascinating to watch how things unfold, especially keeping an eye on decisions coming out of the GC sessions and the annual meetings in the coming years. Leading this organization. It's just a monumental task with such a rich, complicated history.
A deep dive indeed into the history, the challenges, and the future direction of a major global church, all seen through the eyes of its leaders. Thanks for walking us through that incredible journey.
My pleasure. Always fascinating to look at how institutions evolve.